They looked like neighbors, ordinary, harmless. But behind the smiles were monsters. Some hunted in the shadows for decades. Others made the evening news and smiled straight into the camera. They didn't just kill. They tortured, manipulated, devoured, and left a trail of horror that still haunts America to this day. These aren't just criminals. They are legends of terror, each more twisted than the last. Here are 10 of the most dangerous serial killers in U.S. history ranked by body count, brutality, and their terrifying grip on society. Before we begin, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. On this channel, we uncover the darkest, most haunting corners of real-life crime, and you won't want to miss any of our uploads. 1. Samuel Little, 93 murders. He didn't use guns. He didn't use knives, he used his hands, and for over 4 decades, no one stopped him. You may never have heard of Samuel Little, but he is statistically and factually the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. Little targeted society's most vulnerable sex workers, drug addicts, women of color, people the world didn't search too hard for when they disappeared. He once said, "I chose them because I knew nobody was going to miss them." Samuel Little was born in Reynolds, Georgia in 1940. His mother was a teenage sex worker. He never knew his father. By the time he was in kindergarten, Little was already violent, obsessed with women's necks, often caught choking girls on the playground. By his teens, he'd already racked up arrests, shoplifting, assault, breaking and entering. But his criminal career exploded in the 1970s when he left Ohio and began drifting across the country. He never settled, never left a pattern. From California to Texas, Florida to Ohio, he murdered with precision and moved on. Samuel Little never used weapons. He strangled his victims often after offering them drugs or rides. Strangulation left no obvious marks, no bullet wounds, no knife slashes. And more importantly, it left enough ambiguity for coroners to rule deaths as overdoses, accidents, or unknown causes. In most cases, there were no witnesses. No DNA, no urgent investigation. Little didn't just kill. He adapted constantly. And law enforcement, split across dozens of jurisdictions, failed to connect the dots. It wasn't until 2012, over 40 years after his first known murder, that Samuel Little was finally caught. He was arrested at a homeless shelter in Kentucky, wanted for a drug-related parole violation. But a DNA sample collected at the time flagged him in the FBI database. That sample matched 3 cold cases in Los Angeles from the late 1980s. In 2014, he was convicted for those 3 murders and sentenced to life without parole. Most thought that was the end of the story, but in prison, something unexpected happened. In 2018, Texas Ranger James Holland visited Little in prison. He wanted to know if Samuel had killed more than 3 people. Samuel Little began to talk, not just once, but again and again. He described women he'd murdered over decades with stunning detail. The cities, the cars, the jewelry they wore, the color of their nail polish. He even remembered how their heads tilted as they died. He didn't just talk, he drew dozens of portraits, all hand-sketched by Little in prison. He claimed he could still hear their voices, still feel the way their throats collapsed under his grip. Investigators were stunned. These weren't ramblings. These were confessions from a photographic memory, and they began matching missing persons cases to his accounts. As of now, the FBI has confirmed over 60 of his 93 claimed victims. But the true number may be higher. Most victims were women in their 20s or 30s. Some were just teenagers. Many were never even reported missing. The horror isn't just in how many he killed. It's in how long he got away with it. Little operated beneath the radar of the American justice system, proof that when victims aren't wealthy, white, or powerful, justice moves slower, or not at all. Samuel Little died on December 30th, 2020, at the age of 80. He never showed remorse. In fact, he seemed proud. To him, it was a game. He smiled during confessions. He enjoyed the attention. He once said, "They say I'm the worst in history. I say, maybe they're right." 2. Ted Bundy, America's charming serial killer. Have you ever looked at someone and thought, he doesn't look like a killer? That's exactly how Ted Bundy got away with murder again and again. He was handsome, polite, well-spoken. He volunteered at suicide prevention hotlines. He studied law. He had girlfriends. He smiled on camera, but behind that charm was one of the most dangerous serial killers in U.S. history. This is the story of how Theodore Robert Bundy lured dozens of women to their deaths, without a trace of guilt, and became the face of evil with a smile. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. He grew up believing his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents. It was a lie that shaped his childhood and, some say, his identity. He was quiet, intelligent, and manipulative from a young age. Friends recall that he seemed detached, lacking empathy. He enjoyed watching people get hurt. He struggled with relationships. But by the time he reached college, none of that showed. In public, Bundy was magnetic. He dressed well, spoke with confidence. He studied psychology. Later, he'd enroll in law school. He even got involved in politics. He seemed normal, even impressive. But all of it was a mask. In 1974, women began disappearing in the Pacific Northwest. Young, brunette, slim. All of them vanished without a trace. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no witnesses. At first, police didn't connect the cases. They were isolated, spread across Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado. But behind the scenes, Ted Bundy was perfecting his routine. He'd wear a fake cast or walk with a limp. He'd ask women for help carrying books, unlocking his car. He made them feel safe. And when they let their guard down, it was too late. He would hit them with a blunt object, rape them, kill them, then return to the bodies days later, sometimes weeks, to perform horrific acts of necrophilia. Bundy later admitted to keeping severed heads in his apartment. To him, the women weren't people. They were trophies. What made Ted Bundy so terrifying wasn't just the brutality, it was the contradiction. He wasn't a drooling lunatic. He wasn't unstable in the way people expect killers to be. He was calculated, clean-cut, persuasive. That's what allowed him to get so close to his victims, right up until the last moment. Bundy admitted that he never felt empathy. He never cared. And even when he described the killings, he did so with a cold detachment, like he was reading from a script. He once said, "Murder is not about lust and it's not about violence. It's about possession." Ted Bundy was first arrested in 1975 after police pulled him over in Utah and found burglary tools in his car. That should have ended it, but Bundy wasn't done. He escaped custody not once, but twice. In 1977, while awaiting trial in Colorado, he jumped out of a courthouse window during a break. He was missing for 6 days. He was recaptured, but months later, escaped again, this time through a hole he carved in the ceiling of his jail cell. From there, he fled to Florida, changing names, stealing cars, blending in. And that's where he committed his most notorious crimes. In January 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Within 15 minutes, he had attacked 4 women, killing 2. He used a club. He strangled. He bit one of them so violently, he left a deep dental impression, a clue that would later help convict him. Just weeks later, he abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Her body was found in a pig shed. He was arrested again soon after, this time, for good. Ted Bundy's trial was unlike anything America had seen. He refused legal counsel. He chose to represent himself. He cross-examined witnesses. He turned the courtroom into theater, smiling, joking, grandstanding, and he knew the cameras were watching. Women crowded the courtroom to see him. Some believed he was innocent. They called him too handsome to be a killer. The media dubbed it the trial of the century. But behind all the spectacle, the evidence was damning. The bite mark, the fibers, the eyewitnesses. It all led to one conclusion: guilt. In 1979, Ted Bundy was sentenced to death. Twice. For years on death row, Bundy denied everything. He filed appeals. He gave interviews. He played the system. But as his final execution date approached, Bundy began to talk. He confessed to 30 murders. But investigators believe the real number was far higher, possibly over 100. Some victims were never identified. Some were never found. But Bundy remembered their names, their hair, their final moments. He blamed pornography. He blamed childhood trauma. He tried to humanize himself, but nothing could erase what he'd done. And January 24, 1989, exactly 42 years after his birth, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Crowds cheered outside the prison. People held signs. Some even lit fireworks. There was no mourning, only closure. But the questions remain. How did he get away with it for so long? How many did he really kill? And why did so many people believe him? Bundy's case changed the way America thought about evil. It wasn't always grotesque or loud. Sometimes it wore a smile, held a law book, made you feel safe. 3. John Wayne Gacy. What if the smiling man at your kid's birthday party was a murderer? He wore a clown costume. He told jokes. He made balloon animals. But beneath the makeup was a predator. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy, businessman, community volunteer, part-time clown, and one of the most sadistic serial killers in American history. 33 young men and boys, tortured, murdered, and buried right beneath his own house. Let's uncover how one man fooled a city while hiding a horror show under his floorboards. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. On the surface, his life was unremarkable. He came from a working-class family. His father was an alcoholic who regularly beat him. His childhood was filled with fear, rejection, and humiliation. As a teenager, Gacy was awkward but eager to please. He tried to impress others. He wanted to be liked, respected, needed. But inside, something was growing, something dark. And no one saw it. By his 20s, Gacy appeared successful. He got married. He opened a fast food franchise. He joined the local JC's civic group and volunteered at community events. He even performed as a clown under the name Pogo. To everyone around him, Gacy was just a helpful guy. No one knew he was already beginning to spiral. In 1968, Gacy was arrested and convicted for sexually assaulting a teenage boy in Iowa. He was sentenced to 10 years but served only 18 months. When he got out, he moved back to Chicago and started over. He remarried, launched a construction business, hosted backyard barbecues, even took photos with politicians. But behind the scenes, Gacy was hunting. He offered jobs to teenage boys, promising them work, money, guidance. Some were homeless. Some just needed a break. But once inside his home, they disappeared. He used handcuffs, ropes, drugs. He raped, he tortured, and then he killed, one after another. What made Gacy so terrifying wasn't just the brutality of the murders, it was where he hid the evidence. Most of the victims were buried under his house, specifically in the crawlspace beneath his suburban Chicago home. By the mid-1970s, the stench was unbearable. Contractors complained. Neighbors noticed foul smells. Gacy blamed it on moisture, mold, or sewage. But the truth was far worse. He had built his own mass grave. He didn't just bury the bodies, he arranged them, layered them. And when he ran out of room, he started dumping bodies in nearby rivers. All while continuing to attend parades, dressed as a clown. In 1978, 15-year-old Robert Piest went missing after leaving work to meet a man about a job. That man was John Wayne Gacy. When police questioned Gacy, he gave conflicting stories. Claimed he didn't know the boy, but they were suspicious. A search warrant revealed items that didn't belong to Gacy: driver's licenses, jewelry, and the clothes of missing boys. Eventually, the smell from the crawl space gave them probable cause to dig. And what they found shocked even the most seasoned detectives. Body after body, bones, decay, remains of children. 29 bodies beneath one house. John Wayne Gacy was arrested on December 21, 1978. In custody, he confessed to killing over 30 young men and boys. Some he remembered by name, others only by face or clothing. He described how he'd use a handcuff trick to get them restrained. Then he'd strangle them with a rope or garrote. He told investigators that murdering them gave him a sense of power of control. Gacy later claimed he had an alter ego, that Pogo the Clown committed the murders, not him. But there was no doubt. Gacy had planned everything. He was cold, calculated, and completely without remorse. Gacy's trial began in 1980. He was charged with 33 counts of murder. His defense team argued that he was insane, that no sane person could kill so many and bury them under their own home. But prosecutors presented the facts, the physical evidence, the confessions, the timeline, and the jury didn't buy the insanity plea. He was sentenced to death. He spent the next 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center. On May 10, 1994, Gacy ate his final meal: fried chicken, fried shrimp, French fries, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. That night, he was executed by lethal injection. His final words? "Kiss my ass." There were no tears, no apologies, only silence as the man who once smiled for birthday parties took his last breath. Outside the prison, crowds gathered. Some cheered. Some held signs. For many, it was the end of a nightmare that had haunted Chicago for years. John Wayne Gacy's crimes changed the way America viewed safety. He wasn't a stranger in the shadows. He was a neighbor, a businessman, a clown, a man who smiled and shook hands while children vanished around him. Today, Gacy's case is taught in criminology courses around the world. His drawings created in prison are considered disturbing artifacts. And even decades later, new technologies are still helping to identify victims buried under his home. Some names remain unknown. Some families still wait for answers. John Wayne Gacy didn't wear a mask to kill. He wore a smile. He reminded us that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes, they're the ones who wave at you from the street. 4. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. He was invisible, forgettable, ordinary. A man with a job, a wife, a pickup truck, and a secret life soaked in blood. He was the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history before Samuel Little confessed decades later. His name was Gary Ridgway. You may know him as the Green River Killer. But for 2 decades, police had no idea who he really was. He strangled his victims, then dumped their bodies in rivers, woods, and ravines like trash. He kept a tally and showed no remorse. This is the terrifying story of Gary Ridgway, the man who murdered dozens and almost got away with all of it. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah. He grew up in a troubled home. His father worked in a mortuary and often talked about the grotesque nature of death. His mother was domineering, sometimes affectionate, sometimes aggressive. By Ridgway's own account, he developed a twisted obsession with women and with death. As a child, he once stabbed a 6-year-old boy just to see what it felt like. But nobody paid attention. He joined the Navy after high school, got married, went to Vietnam. And when he returned, he settled in Washington State and got a job painting trucks. He was quiet, lived a normal life, married multiple times, went to church. He read the Bible, quoted scripture, and in his free time, he hunted women. In the summer of 1982, bodies began appearing near the Green River in King County, Washington. All young women, all strangled. Many had been sex workers or runaways. Some were just teenagers. Some had been raped after death. By the end of that year, 5 victims had been found, each one dumped near the same stretch of river. The media dubbed him the Green River Killer. Police were baffled. The killer left no fingerprints, no witnesses. His victims were women society often ignored, and that's exactly why he chose them. In Ridgway's mind, prostitutes were easy prey. They trusted strangers. No one would report them missing right away. He later told investigators, "I picked them because I could kill as many as I wanted without getting caught." Ridgway had a system. He'd drive through known prostitution areas in Seattle and Tacoma. He'd pick up women, offer them money for sex, and then lure them to secluded places: his home, a forest, a dirt road. Then he'd strangle them, usually with his bare hands, sometimes with a cord. He often returned to the dump sites to have sex with the bodies. Some victims were buried. Others were left in shallow water. He spread the remains across multiple counties, making it harder for police to track him. And every time he got away, he got bolder. The Green River Task Force was formed in 1984, led by law enforcement veteran Dave Reichert. Over the next decade, detectives poured through thousands of tips, hundreds of suspects. They even questioned Gary Ridgway more than once. He denied everything, passed a polygraph test, gave DNA samples, but at the time, the technology wasn't advanced enough to match it. So they let him go. Ridgway continued to kill throughout the 80s and 90s, but at a slower pace. He married again, seemed to settle down, all the while the case went cold. But the bodies never stopped appearing. In 2001, forensic science caught up to Gary Ridgway. Cold case detectives retested evidence using new DNA technology. 3 samples from the early 1980s matched one man, Gary Ridgway. He was arrested at work in November 2001. Calm, cooperative, almost bored. In custody, faced with overwhelming DNA evidence, Ridgway confessed. Not to 5 or 10, but to dozens. He admitted to 71 murders. Said he lost count. He described where he'd left the bodies. How he choked the life out of his victims. How he sometimes had sex with them after they were dead before dumping them in shallow graves. There was no remorse, no emotion, just details. Gary Ridgway struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he would help identify victims and bodies. He took investigators to the places he buried them, described their faces. He drew maps, shared names, relived the murders. Many families finally received closure, but others never did. To this day, some of Ridgway's victims remain unidentified. Some bodies have never been recovered. In 2003, Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 counts of murder. Later, he confessed to a 49th. He was sentenced to 48 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Ridgway wasn't insane. He wasn't delusional. He was cold, logical, and methodical. He cried once when describing how hard it was to stop killing. He said murder made him feel powerful, that it gave him control in a world where he otherwise felt weak. He kept souvenirs, earrings, shoes, photos. He even brought his young son on ride-alongs while disposing of bodies, so he'd appear harmless if someone saw him. He lived a double life, and it worked. Gary Ridgway didn't kill for fame or for headlines. He killed because he could. His victims were often poor, disenfranchised, on the margins of society, and that's why he got away with it for so long. His case changed how law enforcement approached serial murders. It forced police to take crimes against sex workers seriously. It helped evolve the science of DNA analysis and cold case forensics. And it reminded the world of something chilling. The most dangerous predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like your neighbor, your coworker, the guy driving a pickup truck down the street. Gary Ridgway killed more women than any other convicted serial killer in U.S. history. And for 20 years he got away with it. He's still alive, still in prison, still breathing, while the voices of nearly 50 women are forever silenced. 5. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He struck at night. No warning, no pattern, no mercy. Sometimes he used a gun, other times a knife, sometimes a hammer, or just his bare hands. His victims were children, seniors, women, men. No one was safe. His name was Richard Ramirez, but the world knew him by a darker name, the Night Stalker. This is the story of one of the most feared serial killers in American history and the terror he unleashed across California. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 children in a strict religious household, but his childhood was anything but stable. His father was violent. Richard was beaten regularly. He suffered multiple head injuries, one so severe it caused seizures. But what truly shaped Ramirez was his cousin. Miguel Ramirez, a Vietnam veteran, returned home with disturbing stories and even more disturbing photos. He showed Richard pictures of women he had raped and murdered during the war, and Richard was fascinated. By age 13, he watched Miguel shoot and kill his own wife in front of him. From that point forward, Richard Ramirez was never the same. In his teens, Ramirez became obsessed with Satanism. He read about black magic, human sacrifice, and the occult. He dropped out of school, started using LSD, moved to California, and began breaking into homes stealing jewelry, electronics, and weapons. But soon, burglary wasn't enough. He wanted power, control, fear, and he would find all three through murder. The killing started in 1984. A 79-year-old woman was raped and murdered in her Los Angeles apartment. Then, months later, the bloodshed escalated. In March 1985, Ramirez attacked Maria Hernandez as she entered her home. He shot her in the face, but she survived. Her roommate wasn't so lucky. That same night, he shot another woman, Veronica Yu, in her car. 3 attacks in one day. Los Angeles was paralyzed, and it was only the beginning. Ramirez broke all the rules of profiling. He had no clear victim type. He attacked children, couples, seniors. His youngest known victim was just 9 years old, his oldest 83. He struck in wealthy suburbs and poor neighborhoods. Sometimes he raped. Sometimes he tortured. Sometimes he killed. Sometimes he didn't. He used whatever weapon he could find: guns, knives, hammers, tire irons, machetes. Often, he'd whisper to victims, "Swear to Satan." He left satanic symbols on walls, pentagrams, inscriptions. And he made it clear, he wanted to be feared. Los Angeles wasn't just frightened, it was under siege. The press gave him a name, the Night Stalker. Newspapers screamed with headlines. People began locking their windows for the first time. Gun sales spiked. Families slept with lights on. Meanwhile, the LAPD was scrambling. There was physical evidence, fingerprints, shoe prints, bullets, but Ramirez was always a step ahead. He didn't plan his attacks. He acted on impulse. He didn't care who saw him. He thought he was untouchable. And for a while, he was. One of Ramirez's youngest survivors was a 6-year-old girl. He abducted her from her home, assaulted her, and then dropped her off hours later. But she remembered something, a drawing on the dashboard of his car. Police connected it to a stolen vehicle used in another attack. Step by step, the net was closing in. Then finally a break. A fingerprint recovered from a stolen car was matched to a 25-year-old drifter with a long rap sheet. Richard Ramirez. He had no idea the police had identified him. On August 30th, 1985, he boarded a Greyhound bus from Arizona back to Los Angeles. At a convenience store, he saw his own face on every newspaper. He panicked, tried to steal a car, ran through neighborhoods, desperate. But this time, the people fought back. A group of residents recognized him. They chased him, tackled him, beat him with pipes and fists until police arrived. Ramirez was caught by the very community he had terrorized. Ramirez's trial began in 1989 and lasted over 4 years. The courtroom was packed. He flashed pentagrams on his palm, smiled, laughed. When asked about his crimes, he responded, "Big deal. Death always comes with the territory. See you in Disneyland." The evidence was overwhelming. Fingerprints, shoe prints, DNA eyewitnesses. He was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death 19 times. But even after sentencing, he showed no remorse. Ramirez was sent to San Quentin prison in 1989. There, he lived for 23 years filing appeals, giving interviews, receiving fan mail. Yes, fan mail. Dozens of women became obsessed with him. One even married him in 1996. He never showed regret, never apologized. He once said, "I am beyond good and evil." But in the end, evil caught up to him. In 2013, at age 53, Richard Ramirez died of cancer, still on death row. He escaped execution, but not death. Richard Ramirez didn't kill for money, or revenge, or love. He killed because he liked it. He fed on fear. He thrived on chaos. He believed in Satan, but more importantly, he believed in himself. And for over a year, he made an entire state tremble. The Night Stalker didn't just take lives, he shattered the illusion of safety in people's homes. Because when Ramirez was out there was no pattern, no reason, and no mercy. Let us know in the comments. Which of these stories disturbed you the most as you wait for part 2? Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video if it gave you chills. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and remember, evil has many faces.